In this video, I'm going to cover 5 ways teams sabotage their own token generation event and how this can kind of set them up for a rough journey down the line. So the first one is launching way too early with no real revenue or even utility for the token. While in some cases it's acceptable, right? If you're trying to basically do an ICO to raise funding to go build something out and people are aware of that, for most venture-backed teams, it doesn't really make sense. For one, you've already raised funding. So you should wait to launch your token until you have product market fit. The whole reason you go and raise funding from VCs is to actually go and find product market fit. And then you want to scale that with a token, right? One thing I hear is, oh, there's a bull market, so I should launch something. I mean, to be honest, you could time this and sometimes basically ride the wave up. But if you're wrong, then your token just bleeds out in slow market environments. And I think right now what we're seeing is that real revenue and real traction is really the main thing driving valuations in the space, which is long overdue. So the only way tokens do well in bear markets is by actually having real revenue, real traction, real utility, and real usage. That means that if you just launch something that has none of those things, your token is just going to go to zero. Great examples of tokens that are performing well right now are HyperLiquid, Ethena, Syrup, even Pump.fun is doing decently well because they have a ton of revenue. Note that meme coins are an exception here, but your project is probably not a meme coin. So we need to keep that in mind. An example of a team that I think did TG too early, as much as I like them, was Infinigods. I think they basically pushed it out way too early, trying to capitalize on some trends. And because the game wasn't really ready yet, there wasn't that much real traction and revenue growth, right? So I think you just have to be aware that things have changed where just launching whatever token with a hot narrative is just going to ensure success. That doesn't really happen anymore. Now, the second side of this is thinking that token marketing or investment relations aren't necessary. On the other side of the spectrum, there's a lot of fundamentally strong teams that have actual traction. They're building cool products. They have revenue coming in, usage, but they do zero token related marketing. And what I mean by that, I don't mean like, hey, they just pay a bunch of shillers. It's more engaging with crypto natives, with figuring out what sort of narratives will work, working with key influencers or partners that can amplify that message. Now, when you don't do that, when you don't engage with crypto natives, you're essentially missing out on a massive valuation premium. A great example of that is the DePIN space or the decentralized physical infrastructure space, where a lot of founders don't have that much experience on the crypto side of things. So they're not out there engaging with crypto natives. And this kind of sucks because they might be getting real revenue, real traction, and they have some level of success with that, but they're missing out on a massive valuation premium that happens when you know how to storytell well. And this is true in public markets. In, NVIDIA does well partially because obviously they have an amazing product, but also because of the cult behind it and because Jensen's a great storyteller, right? Like his presentation that he did at one of their last events was so good that it changed a lot of people from bearish to very bullish. So you kind of need to have great storytelling abilities for the crypto native crowd because they are the ones who have the most access to go and purchase your token. Now that's slowly changing a bit. Wall Street's coming in and they're starting to engage, but you still have tons of capital in the crypto native space, and you want to make sure you get that valuation premium on that, right? Especially for DePIN teams where a strong token can really incentivize people to engage with the network and provide supply. So a lot of DePIN teams need to hit a certain scale of supply before they can go and start closing larger B2B deals, because until you get that level of penetration or supply, it doesn't really make business sense for somebody to come to you, right? For example, for Helium, if they had basically just like network in one city, it wouldn't be valuable, but because they have huge coverage everywhere, they're doing very well. And they did a great job of engaging with the crypto native crowd. So you kind of need to play that game. And obviously, if you don't know how to play that game, you need to bring on people who are good at that. Another big thing is investment relations. So actually engaging with liquid funds, having a list of liquid funds. Again, if you're not good at that, you want to bring in people who are good at that. At Crescendo, we're mostly focused on the go-to-market, the retail messaging, the marketing side of things. But then we also have great partners on the investment relations side of things, which it's very important to actually make sure that liquid funds, etc., are in the know about what you're building and have open lines of communication with you so they can make informed decisions. Now, again, none of this is financial advice, etc., but just sharing what I see in the space. The third problem I see is thinking farmers are users and then failing to retain the small number of users that are actually real users. So a lot of DeFi protocols struggle with this, or anything that requires essentially engagement. Gaming teams as well. They love to talk about how on the last event they got so many players, but yeah, these players are incentivized. They're farming your points program or your airdrop. You don't know if they're real users or not. and they're not going to stick around after TGE. So the big thing here, and the teams that have done it well, is teams that have found product market fit before launching some sort of points program or incentivized clear farming program, right? They have waited a while. They've talked to their users extensively. The founders are constantly talking to people who are using their product and trying to figure out, okay, do I have real product market fit? Or are people just using this because they think they'll get an airdrop? So quite frankly, it's kind of delusional to think that these mercenary farmers that come in from points program are going to stick around. A great counterexample of a team is Ethena, because they actually figured out product market fit, had a great product, had like a ton of TVL. Then they basically 10x their TVL with their shards campaign, which just sucked in capital. But they didn't start that campaign, which was clearly an incentivized campaign, until they already had product market fit and a lot of users. A great example of a team that did this badly is Steppen, right? They had this whole walk to earn thing. Again, it was kind of like a whole Ponzi-ish game. But if you talk to a lot of people, they would say it's sustainable and it's realistically, but really most of the users were using it to just farm these points, right? And you kind of have to understand that. And before you go out there and like scale your product, you want to figure out that core mechanism or core sustainability before you go and try to launch these incentivized rewards programs. Important thing here is understand your audience, right? Really, really talk to them as much as possible and talk to people who are actually using your product. This is like the key takeaway here. The fourth thing is not understanding your target audience, right? An example of this is Web3 games. A lot of crypto games are trying to appeal to both traditional gamers as well as crypto gamers as well, who are usually they just want glorified degen games where they can risk or win big. So a great example of teams that are actually understanding their target audiences are games like Gigaverse or Play Cambria. These teams really understand that they're kind of dealing with people who want DeFi, but with a game on front, and they want to just, it's kind of like their favorite way to gamble, right? Instead of pump.fun, it's kind of playing these kind of games and they have some fun with it. They get some utility out of it. Another example is FIFA Rivals or NFL Rivals. They're by Mythical Games and they just have a ton of normal users, but they abstract blockchain tech completely. They don't talk about it. You don't really interact with it. It's all about the gameplay experience, and they're 100% focused on that. They've achieved 650,000 downloads. The parent developer Mythical Games has over $650 million in in-game transactions across their suite of games, including NFL Rivals and FIFA Rivals. So they've gone for the basically traditional gamer audience using blockchain in the back. Now, if you try to go somewhere in the middle, that's where you struggle, right? If I can see the point of perhaps appealing to crypto natives after you have a successful game to basically get them to go and like essentially, if you have a public asset or public token, then crypto natives are who are going to buy that asset. However, in terms of actual product market fit, crypto natives, they're not really gamers per se, right? So you really want to understand who you're appealing to. The fifth one is having a launch at a very low float and a very high FTV. This kind of results in your chart just going straight down. Credibility with your community kind of dislikes you. Traders also don't like that. And people know that that high fully diluted valuation is kind of just not realistic. Great example of this was Gunzilla. So Gunzilla launched pretty high fully diluted valuation. I think it was perhaps something around $1 billion, right? You can see this chart, it just goes straight down and then there's a little pump and then it just kind of goes down. It's doing a bit better. They played that playbook, right? They launched with a very small amount of token float, and also it was launched at a quite high fully diluted valuation. So it's better to launch at a bit of a lower valuation and then people can come in and buy and like the price kind of finds its stable point, but it's actually a bit more stable and it shows like the upward chart versus like just launching at a very high valuation that can't be sustained. And then, you have that red down chart that does not look good. So just keep that in mind. Also, when you launch with very low floats where only 1 or 2 or 3% of token supply is live, you have to be aware that that can be quite risky, especially if a lot of those tokens are given out to people in the form of a launch pool or an airdrop. So with Gunzilla, actually they launched on Binance launch pool, I believe, and they gave a ton of tokens. So they gave way more tokens to them than anybody else. And basically all of those people dumped the tokens, right? So I get it. They wanted to get that tier 1 exchange listing, but I think things could have been played differently. And obviously, if you're going to give like a significant portion of token supply and the majority of your unlocked token supply to a launch pool where people can basically claim it and then airdrop, basically sell it immediately for a pretty high reward. And those people are not at all involved in your ecosystem. they're not at all people who care about your token, it doesn't make sense to me, right? But I get it. People want that tier 1 listing. So all interesting dynamics. I think the big takeaway here is you really want to think deeply about this, like study what went wrong and write with projects, study what the market's doing now, and then make your best decision with that. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're a founder looking for marketing help or go-to-market strategy, feel free to reach out to Crescendo. If you're just watching this video, feel free to subscribe, or if you're on Twitter, give it a like, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.